afternoon and welcome to this edition of Border Report Live. My name's Rudy Mideles and I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of deep South Texas. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, and today our South Texas correspondent Sandra Sanchez is going to join us to break down the conditions being reported inside an ICE detention facility in the San Antonio area. It's the same facility we talked about just a few weeks ago when the family of a McAllen, Texas high school mariachi band student whose family was detained there was finally released by a congressman with the help of local congressmen like Congressman Joaquin Castro. So we'll check in with Sandra in just a little bit later in today's edition. But first, as always, let's go ahead and start today's program by taking a look at what's trending across the border. Starting with across the country, many cities and states are trying to limit what federal agents can and cannot do in their communities. It's all part of their efforts to counter the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration, which has led to ICE raids all over the United States. In Connecticut, a Democrat-sponsored bill that would hold U.S. immigration and customs enforcement accountable for misconduct and constitutional violations by their agents advanced through the Senate along party lines on Tuesday. The law would also limit ICE arrests for civil offenses in certain locations and prevent federal and state law enforcement from wearing masks. The bill was passed by a vote of 24-10.
All of this violates the Supremacy Clause, and it's going to get shot down by the DOJ. So why are we doing this then? Other than little targeted aspects that also impact local police, which have some of the greatest oversight and restrictions in the country.
The residents of the state of Connecticut expect this. They've asked for this. They've demanded this. We made a promise, and we've kept our promise.
With the growing use of automated license plate readers, the bill would also prevent law enforcement from using that data collected to determine suspected immigration status or track people receiving reproductive or gender-affirming care. That bill now goes to the Connecticut House of Representatives for approval. In South Texas, 2 Venezuelan doctors are in ICE custody after they were arrested by federal agents. Dr. Ezequiel Veliz was stopped at a federal checkpoint as he was moving to Houston. Dr. Rubiles Bolivar was at an airport in McAllen, Texas this weekend when she was stopped from boarding her flight to California for an asylum hearing. Today, the Mexican-American Legislative Caucus issued a statement demanding the immediate release of both doctors. Spokesperson for the physicians say both had been working legally and providing critical care in one of the most medically underserved regions in the state of Texas. The Texas Mexican-American Legislative Caucus's chairman, Representative Ramon Romero Jr., said in a statement, quote, "We were told the immigration enforcement would focus on the criminals, the worst of the worst. These were neither. They were the best of the best. Instead, we are seeing law-abiding doctors, people who followed the law and are caring for our communities, taken into custody for deportation. These are not criminals." The Department of Homeland Security says Dr. Bolivar overstayed her visa since 2017 and had no legal status. Dr. Veliz's work permit renewal was halted due to the recent pause on visas for Venezuelans, putting him in a legal limbo. White House border czar Tom Homan criticized the Catholic Church following President Trump's criticism of Pope Leo XIV, the first American-born pontiff, on social media. On Tuesday, Homan spoke to reporters outside the White House. He said he loves the Catholic Church and he just wishes that they'd stick to fixing the church because there's issues. He said, "I know because I'm a member instead of politics," end quote. Homan specifically defended the Trump administration policies cracking down on immigration, saying that with, quote, 97% less people coming, less women are being raped, less people are dying from the journey, and less people are being sent back.
I wish they sit down with me and hear my experiences the last 40 years. Maybe they understand why a secure border saves lives. A secure border is the most humane thing this country can do.
Homan went on to say that he wishes the Catholic Church would stay out of immigration because he says they don't know what they are talking about. Homan is one of several Catholics, along with Vice President J.D. Vance, First Lady Melania Trump, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who serve in the Trump administration. Pope Leo has been critical of the administration's policies, saying in October that there is, quote, inhuman treatment of immigrants in the United States. He also called it extremely disrespectful. Trump on Sunday called the Pope weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy because the Pope has spoken out against the war in Iran. In South Texas this morning, a high-speed chase ended in a rollover crash on an incredibly busy highway. The Texas Department of Public Safety say the chase happened in Brownsville when the driver of the SUV, who had 4 migrants allegedly in the vehicle, took off from DPS troopers. The chase ended a few miles away when the vehicle rolled over and ended up on its side. The driver was taken to a local hospital with minor injuries. Now, according to DPS, 4 migrants were in the SUV at the time of the crash, and they were released to U.S. Border Patrol. It is unclear if any of those migrants were injured in the crash. The location of the chase is just a few miles north of the Rio Grande, which borders with Mexico. Residents in San Diego, California say the chronic sewage crisis that has plagued the region for decades has gone from a nuisance to an acute health hazard. That is an issue that we have covered here extensively on Border Report Live and, of course, on borderreport.com. But as Jamie Chamber tells us, county officials say the toxicity of the Tijuana River has reached record levels.
Residents in the South Bay say the rolling chronic sewage crisis has gone from a nuisance to an acute health hazard.
These levels of hydrogen sulfide, which is a toxic gas that smells like rotten eggs, was very prevalent back then. Now, those levels have exceeded those numbers from 2024. And the number of hours during the day that we are exposed to these gases is now longer.
State and county officials say the toxicity in the Tijuana River has reached record levels, and local leaders are calling on the governor and the president to call for a state of emergency, which would waive all local, state, and federal regulations, allowing emergency action to handle the overwhelming sewage health disaster.
If you're smelling it, that means you're breathing it in. If you're breathing in hydrogen sulfide, that means you're breathing in potentially dozens, if not hundreds, of other chemicals, pollutants.
With residents of Imperial Beach and the surrounding communities reporting respiratory, stomach, skin, and eye irritations, the glaring question is it safe to live in Imperial Beach?
Nobody should be living in these conditions. Period.
Between the U.S. and Mexico, hundreds of thousands of people are exposed to the hydrogen sulfide emanating from the Tijuana River Valley. Currently, while work is ongoing with catch collectors, Aguirre says there is no plan to address the root cause of the issue, which is the broken Mexican waste management system.
I have to have these at all times.
Even the supervisor says headaches are a daily occurrence when she gets home from work. This is the issue Aguirre's been fighting to solve even before she ran for office. Why do you say?
Because I love Ivy. Oh, you're going to get me emotional.
That was Jamie Chambers reporting. As I said, we have covered this issue extensively on Border Report. And if you'd like to read more about this story, our coverage on the Tijuana River Valley environmental issues, or any of the stories that you hear or see here on Border Report Live, you can always visit borderreport.com 24/7 for these and more stories, all having to do with the U.S.-Mexico border and beyond. When we return, our Sandra Sanchez is going to join us right here in Harlingen to talk about the ICE detention center that we briefly mentioned yesterday, just outside of San Antonio, and the conditions that's being reported inside the facility. So stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 2 minutes. Welcome back to this edition of Border Report Live. We briefly touched on the subject of the conditions at an ICE detention facility just outside of San Antonio yesterday. Sandra Sanchez, our South Texas correspondent, joins us now to talk more about the issues that are being uncovered. Sandra, you were working on this story yesterday when we were on Border Report Live. Tell us about it.
Yeah, hey, Rudy. And I've been there to the Dilley detention facility. It's about 90 minutes outside, southwest of San Antonio. Antonio. It's called Dilley because that's the nearby town. A report just recently released by two nonprofits says that the facility is, quote, inhumane. It calls the conditions poor. It says that they're pervasive and systemic, that children and parents have limited access to clean water, nutritious food, sleep, personal hygiene, privacy, and clean and appropriate clothing. Now, the report was put out by the Human Rights First group and the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services, Inc., which is also known as RAICES. They conducted this report over the period from April of 2025 through September. There were about 5,600 migrants held at the facility there during that time. And they said that other things that really worried them was the lack of legal representation that these people were given. They were not told what their rights were. It said that that violated their due process laws. It said that families were threatened with separation if they bucked the system, and that many families were actually separated, children in one area, parents in another, or even children or parents sent to other facilities, physically separated. And also said that children were being held there over 20 days, which is a violation of the 1997 Flores settlement. We've talked about that a number of times. It basically says children can't be incarcerated for that. And it also said pregnant women didn't get prenatal monitoring or care, and it put the unborn babies at risk. So, huge non-complimentary words for this facility. This facility, as you remember, was shut down and reopened by the Trump administration. It was shut down in 2024 under the Biden administration, reopened in 2025. It's run by Core Civic, which is a for-profit prison organization. And there's always just been, so many complaints of it. Congressman Joaquin Castro has visited a number of times, visited again this week, says in a social media post that he met with a family and that he talked to this woman, Hayam El Gama, and her 5 children. And he says, quote, they have been locked away at the Dilley trailer prison for almost a year. The mother has fluid near her heart and is in severe pain, but won't be given proper medicine. He went on to say that one of the woman's 16-year-old son had delayed treatment for an appendicitis, and the 5-year-old daughter needs some oral dental surgery, quote, but ICE refuses care. So, I visited the Dilley facility, got a tour, and we are not allowed to talk to any of the detainees. So, what we're hearing from these congressional delegations that go through and what they're coming out and saying is really revelation. Lets us have eyes on the ground there. ICE defends these facilities, says that proper nutrition, education, care is given to them, that they're given food and clothing. But this report says that it's not that way.
And one of the things you mentioned there, proper medical attention and proper food, proper nutrition. I just keep going back to this because I think when we were covering that McAllen High mariachi band member student and his family who was up there in Dilley, Congressman Castro had a press conference after touring the facility when the rest of that student's family were released. And we'll get to those family separations here in a moment. But one of the things that stood out to me was Congressman Castro talking about the medical attention that pregnant migrants were receiving, or in this case, not receiving, while they were in there. And same goes for nutrition. He mentioned the story of a pregnant migrant who did have a well visit to an OBGYN for a checkup. And apparently the doctor had told her, you need to eat more because the baby hasn't grown since the last time we had a checkup. And that kind of speaks to both of those things, both the medical care and the nutrition. Again, that is from Congressman Castro.
Right.
Nothing that we've received from ICE. Obviously, we wouldn't get any medical documents on any of the migrants.
And we had, a couple of weeks ago, we had Efrain Olivares at the National Immigration Law Center on our show. Now, he was the attorney representing Antonio Gomez Cuellar, the 18-year-old mariachi band member who was detained and sent to the Raymondville detention facility while in Del Valle, where all the rest of his family were sent to Dilley, so they were separated. They showed up for an immigration hearing, and then they were arrested. But he said that at the Raymondville facility, that the boy didn't get the proper education. He needed to take his tests, college tests, and that he wasn't prepared for STAR, and he did not get proper sleep. And we keep hearing these stories. We keep hearing about people sleeping on the ground with Mylar blankets at detention facilities, at CBP processing facilities, and we just interviewed the woman who wrote the book earlier this week, and she said one of the children kept telling her about how they ate a frozen burrito, so apparently not thawed. I don't imagine a child making that specific detail up. So, like we've said, we only get these hearsay pieces of information. We are not allowed to talk directly to the people, but this report has some pretty tough words for what they're doing there in Dilley. And bottom line is they call for it to be shut down. They call for all family detention facilities to be shut down. They're asking Congress to enact legislation to stop the detainment and arrest and detention of families going forward. So, heavy words. I don't think that's going to happen in this Republican Congress. And with all the money that has been appropriated for ICE and detention facilities, there has been a pause on these ICE warehouses, but Dilley is...
The money's there, and it's going to be spent somehow, some way by the end of the fiscal year.
And Dilley is the largest family detention facility in the nation. And, it really is set aside. It is... Congressman Castro has on his X account an interview he did with Univision, and he calls it trailer. And they are really a set of trailers, just trailer after trailer after trailer. It's not really a nice place to be for a very long time. So,
going back to that McAllen mariachi student, a lot of the questions were like, why was he separated from his family? And well, technically, he was 18 years old.
An adult.
And so they sent the rest of his family as a unit together to Dilley. He was kept here in Raymondville, just about 30 or 40 miles away from us as an adult, as you said. But if I understand this right, in this report, they're suggesting that families can even be separated even further despite some of those children being under 18?
Yes, and actually I was working with a Russian family that was detained, and I was trying to get into a facility to interview her, and ultimately she clammed up on me and stopped talking, but and they were going to be deported to a third country that they were okay with. But what she said was that she only gets to visit her children for 1 hour on Fridays, that their children were in the same facility that she and her husband were, but they could only speak to them for 1 hour on Fridays. Her children had been there, she said, for almost 2 years, and actually were losing their ability speaking Russian, and were learning Spanish from being with all the other young teenage boys that they were with, and they were even having trouble communicating with one another as a family. But just the idea of being in the same facility and only seeing your child for 1 hour a week, I had never heard that before, but...
And I think that's the understanding that we have when we think of these, family units being sent to a detention facility together. We think that the family is, maybe staying in a cell with, even if not alone, at least with a couple of other family units as well. But so now all these detainees are saying they're actually being separated from their families despite being in a family unit detention center.
I think the best chance you have to stay together is if you are a mother and with two very young children, maybe of the same sex, because as soon as your boy gets 10, 11, they immediately separate. Older boys immediately. 14-year-old boys, they're sent to a whole different area. And so, I know we discussed about another woman earlier this week with a woman who wrote the book, and she had migrated up, and she was stuck at a detention facility with her 14-year-old son. And again, he was separated. So that's kind of the age gap that you really have to worry. The government is just not going to let them be near you. So, yeah, you know, you mentioned earlier at the top of the show the 2 doctors that have been held in detention. That's also a big thing. Congressman Castro, he's a Democrat from San Antonio, but he has really been all over this issue. We talked about it. He was here last week. I interviewed him because of the pregnant migrant teen sent to the facility in San Benito, and he went there. Actually, Monday, he went to Laredo. There is a man who was arrested here in the RGV on his way to the hospital. His wife, they have a child, a little baby girl, 2 months old, in the NICU. I understand he was delivering milk for the child. I stopped him, picked him up, detained him, and he was sent to Laredo holding facility. And that's where Castro went on Monday to talk to him. And, you know, I mean, it's just, he's kind of all over South Texas saying, his big thing also is these people are not criminals. They don't have criminal charges against them. Why are they being detained?
Yeah, and that's a question that I know came up when they came to visit that San Benito facility. And in addition to the question of, yeah, you know, these pregnant migrants that are giving birth, technically these children that are born in these detention facilities, or while the mother is in detention, technically American citizens.
They're U.S. citizens,
which is another question that's, you know, been cropping up now and being talked about more too since that visit by Congressman Castro. And of course, our congressman here, Vicente Gonzalez, his district, where that San Benito detention facility for pregnant mothers actually lies, just a few miles south of us here, about 10 miles away from where we sit right now. But one of the things that we've been seeing happen more frequently since the McAllen High School detainment and the family getting separated, the family getting sent to Dilley, one student, the 18-year-old here in Raymondville, is protesters actually coming from the Rio Grande Valley up to Dilley. And on Saturday, another caravan is leaving for Dilley from Edinburgh, Texas, which is about 30 miles up the road from us here, to protest at that facility. If you'd like to read more about that, and of course, Sandra's reporting here today, you can find a link at borderreport.com. Thanks so much for joining us today, Sandra.
Thank you.
All right, stay with us. We've got a few more headlines to get to you when we return, so be right back. Welcome back to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen, Texas. Getting into some of your border economics. If you didn't know, Mexico is the United States' biggest trading partner. So when border crossings fluctuate, experts want to know why. In South Texas, trade and traffic are down a bit at some ports of entry, but not at others. Here's reporter Jorge Vela.
Trade numbers are down across several South Texas bridges, but in terms of crossings, those numbers remain high. New numbers from the FAR International Bridge show trade with Mexico down 3.36%, with exports falling 5.45% and imports down 2.29%. Despite that, total trade still topped $43 billion. City leaders say activity at the bridge remains strong. In a statement, the city of FAR says trade value does not always reflect actual crossings. Trade figures are based on the total value of goods being transported, which can fluctuate month to month and year over year due to less production in Mexico caused by diverse factors. U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis points to tariffs and a slowing economy as possible reasons for the decline. Meanwhile, traffic is up. FAR reports a 3% increase in crossings for 2025, totaling about 1.4 million. In Cameron County, the trend looks different. Cameron County Administrator Pete Sepulveda reports both trade and traffic are on the rise.
We had a slight, increase in commercial traffic, 3 to 5%, but at the Free Trade Bridge, we had like a 25-30% increase in commercial traffic. So, and we've seen that trend, the last 2.5 years.
Sepulveda credits that growth to a more diversified flow of goods, including fuel, auto parts, and steel, as companies like SpaceX and LNG continue growing.
It's a little bit more diversified than one product, and that might be also a reason why, we haven't seen the decrease that other international bridges have seen.
Sepulveda says lower wait times at some crossings, like the Los Indios International, are also attracting more traffic.
I don't know if more companies are realizing that the wait time to cross at Los Indios is a lot lower than other crossings, and they're taking advantage of that. But we've seen that trend, and hopefully that trend continues because we do have a lot of capacity at that bridge. The wait times are low.
Sepulveda says one growing concern is high fuel prices, which could impact commercial traffic if those continue to rise. For NBC23 from FAR, I'm Jorge Vela.
Last year, two-way trade between the bordering nations reached a record $873 billion. Before we go, wanted to remind you that you can always stay informed on the story shaping the U.S.-Mexico border while you're on your commute home or out walking the dog, or maybe you're getting a workout in at the gym or even doing some grocery shopping. That's when I listen back to our podcast because we are available in podcast form. You can listen to us now at any of the apps there at the bottom of your screen, and you can get us in both audio and video version on the YouTube app. That is going to do it for us today. For Sandra Sanchez, our South Texas correspondent right here in Harlingen, Texas, my name's Rudy Mireles. We'll see you next time.